Yo, chat, I pull up. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Wizard101 video. I hopefully the audio is okay. Let me know in the comments below if it is. I tried to mess with it because I noticed that it was extremely quiet, and it's this weird thing that my computer does sometimes, and the recording does, where the audio will just like suddenly shift in volume. So like right now, all of a sudden it got really quiet when it was fine. I've turned it up, and hopefully it's not too loud. Let me know if it is. It'll be fixed next video. But anyways, let's move on. What's the topic of this video? What are we talking about today? What's going on? Well, today I'm going to be teaching you, yes, you, little child, about how to properly, let me rephrase that. What stats to properly focus on in Wizard101. Now, what do I mean by this? Definitely, this is a beginner, more aimed towards beginner guide. Because definitely a lot of late game know how to use it. But if you want to watch and see what I think of certain stats, feel free to do so anyway. This is basically for low levels that are struggling to know what to get, particularly in regards to things, because right, like by the time you reach level 10, you already see you have a choice, but like as a fire anyway, you have a choice between accuracy gear, getting a health gear, getting some damage. Like, what should you do? And I basically just wanted to make this video to focus on certain things. Enough introduction. Anyway, sorry, I'm really tired. Anyways, let's get into this. The first thing to know about Wizard101 is that the best stat above all is damage. Now, obviously, this isn't necessarily true for every wizard, but it definitely is a large factor. You want more damage, right, on just about every school, no matter what it is. The only schools where that's really the exception is if you are a life who's using a healer setup, or if you are an ice who is using a resist tanky setup. Really, every other school, though, it is better to focus on damage. A lot of gear, especially from levels 1 to 25, won't give that much damage, but you can see there's a few here that actually do give some damage. Like, this robe gives 5 damage. Like, that's pretty good for level 25, And then, obviously, once you get the Zeus gear, you're going to jump up even more. It's important to focus on damage. Now, what prompted this and why exactly do I think people need this guide? Well, at low levels, you'll see things like more health, you'll see things like accuracy, and you'll say, I definitely think it's good to get accuracy because I don't want to fizzle, or, I want more health so I don't die. But especially for hitting schools like fire, storm, myth, death, health isn't nearly as important. It's very important to have that damage, especially for schools such as death, where a lot of their heal back comes from the amount of damage they do. So as death, you want to be getting as high of damage as you can, especially. Like, in my opinion, it matters even more as a death to get higher damage than it does as a storm or fire. I mean, I guess that's just what you're, how you view it, but for me, it's very important. Now, what other stats are important? Obviously, accuracy is pretty important, but the stat that I would put to be the second most important stat in gear is actually power pip chance. And the reason for that is, and this obviously depends on the school. If you're a storm, no. If you are any other school, though, getting power pips is actually incredibly useful, and I don't have a single wizard that's like a higher level that doesn't have a whole or 100% power pip chance, just because I really, really like having that guarantee that I'm going to be able to use the spell that I want. This is especially important for like if you're trying to do two round runs in detritus or whatever. My if I pip failed on my fire, I wouldn't be able to use Fire Dragon, right? I wouldn't be able to use, like, if I wanted to use King Artorias, I wouldn't be able to use King Artorias. And it's pretty important to note. Now, I'm sorry if this is a bit all over the place, but a stat that I feel like a lot of people focus on that I don't think is important is actually resistance. And you may be wondering, like, resistance. Why wouldn't that be important? Well, obviously it depends on the school. I'd say for a life, yes, it's useful. For an ice, yes, it's useful. But for most other schools, it's actually not. And here's why. Because when you start focusing on resist, you start sacrificing a bit of damage. And why that is not a good idea is that means that you are going to be dragging out the fight more. So what I mean by this is that you don't need resist if you end the fight before they hit you kind of strategy, right? So my whole mentality behind everything in Wiz is to try to end the fight as quick as possible. And this leaves less room for death, less room for potential damage, because you get it. You try to kill them before they can build up that damage and do that damage to you, right? And for me, this rings true for a lot of schools. Especially, I found as a death, I didn't need resist at all because I had my healbacks constantly. So no matter how low on health I got, I could just use a healback spell, boom, get some heals, and I am back up a bit more. So I feel like resist isn't as much as people chalk it up to be. Obviously, it's not a bad idea to have, but for example, I actually wouldn't recommend on most schools having resist on a pet. I think it's much better to have damage, and if you want crit on it, go ahead and put crit on it. But for most schools, like a 5 damage pet, I'd say 5 out of 7 schools, ice and life being the exception, 5 damage pet is fine. Balance obviously could be another exception. You might want to get that resist, but it really depends on what you want to do as a balance. Balance can do anything. They can hit, they can tank, they can whatever, right? They're balanced. Surprising. Now, one thing I'm not talking about is crit rating. And that is because crit rating does not matter as much anymore. Really getting it isn't that important, especially at a lower level. What I would recommend doing is not really focusing on it at all. Just get stuff like the Waterworks gear, get stuff like the Darkmoor gear, and you will be perfectly fine with what you have. For example, my fire's fine at 711. My death for the longest time had around 400 when he was in the hundreds, and before that he had like 200. I have a myth who has 250. All of those are perfectly fine numbers, right? You still crit pretty frequently, and that, I think, is important. You don't really need to focus on it, because if you focus on it, you sacrifice a lot of damage, a lot of resist, power pip, accuracy, all those kinds of things. Now, I want to go over... I think I forgot to fully go into the story later, because I think I went off on a tangent, because I'm a bit tired. But what sparked all of this in these stats and me going over them? Well, the other day, I met someone in the comments. His name was Nathan. I don't know if why do I feel like I already told this story? I feel like I already told this story. Did I tell this yesterday? I think I might have, actually. But I met this balance named Nathan in the comments asking for help, and he was in Azteca. And I was like, okay, I'll help him. And when I was doing the fight, I checked his gear, and I noticed something really alarming, and that was really none of his gear was good. I believe he was using the level 70 Senator's Boots, the Poseidon Robe at that level, which isn't awful, but not very good either. And then he was using like a bizarre hat. And I said, you really should get Waterworks gear. And if you don't have that, then you should get Winter Tusk Crafted. Right now it's double reagents, and you could probably get up to that pretty fast. Get the Winter Tusk Crafted, and it would probably be a massive upgrade for you. And he was like, oh, I thought it would be a good idea to focus on crit. And I said, really, it's not. And I think that that's a mistake a lot of people make. A lot of people think, oh, let's focus on crit. And that's just not a good idea. It's much better to have that base damage, especially since crit chance nowadays is much higher than it used to be. Much, much higher than it used to be. And that means you don't need to focus as much on the crit rating anymore. Also, an important thing to note is that crit rating isn't even as much based on percent as it used to be. It used to be like, at this level, this would be like 80%. Now this is like 90% on most early game enemies, 70% on late game enemies, and it doesn't matter if I had 100 more, 100 less, that's how much it would probably probably be. So really that's what I wanted to go into, was what stats should you focus on while giving you a quick overview. Let me know if you disagree with me in the comments. I think a few people will, actually, because I feel like a lot of people think it's good to focus on resist, and I just don't think it is. There's really never been a character where I've said, yeah, resist is what I need right now. Obviously, my ice has resist gear. He has like 60 base resist using his damage gear, which, you know, he has 100 damage in. But I think it's important to know what stats to focus on, especially as a beginner, because I can tell you back in the day, back when I first started, I was buying everything that had the most amount of health because I wanted to have the highest amount of health. I didn't focus at all on damage. I didn't focus on resist, accuracy, any of that. I just focused on health, and obviously that was not the best idea, and I was struggling with the game, and I didn't know why. Here's why. You want to have good stats. So, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, drop a like, hit the sub button. I appreciate all of you tuning in. I appreciate all the support recently. Having a good time. About to hit 2,300 subs. That's pretty darn pog. Pretty darn pog, if I do say so myself. So, adios. Have a fantastic day. Thank you all for watching.